Well, welcome. What a fantastic crowd. Thank you all for being here tonight, and I want to welcome and thank Mayor Littlefield for being here. I see City Council Rep Manny Rico, Peter Murphy, two County Commissioners, Mackey and Tim Boyd, and I'm sure I left someone else out. But thank you all so much for being here. I think this is exciting that we had this kind of response, and we're excited about the projects. Well, 25 years ago, River City was created to turn visionary plans for our downtown into reality. And these real places have paved the way for the vibrant and beautiful downtown that we all love and enjoy. But as a story of Chattanooga's transformation is told, one aspect that I'm sure this crowd knows firsthand is that often the roles of quality design and planning are misunderstood, or sometimes they're not understood at all by the community at large. In the early 80s, Lyndhurst Foundation decided that investing in planning was the best way to regenerate and revitalize our city. And aren't we all so glad they did? Our city is more walkable, livable, enjoyable because of it, and because of the amazing work of the Urban Design Studio. The Urban Design Studio and its open process was inspirational as well as transformational. It's transformational in how we view our city and how we engage our citizens. And we're hoping this project will do the same thing. With tonight's kickoff of the Urban Design Challenge, we pay homage to this important legacy, and we hope the challenge serves to re-energize a conversation about the importance of quality urban design and to raise the bar on not only what's possible, but what's expected as our downtown faces new challenges and opportunities for growth ahead. I want to say this would not be possible without the generous support from the McClellan, Benwood, and Lyndhurst Foundations. Thank you for all you do for our community and for this program. And now I'd like to invite Alan McCauley to come up. He's the chair of the Lyndhurst Foundation, and have him come up and share his perspective and introduce our keynote speaker.
Thank you, Kim. Those of you who know me well shudder in terror when they see me go to a microphone with a piece of paper in my hand. They all look at their watches and say, oh my, but I told Kim I would do this as quickly as I could. When Kim asked me to reflect on the last 25 years and to answer the question and to introduce Alex, I knew she had done so because of my extraordinary good taste in all things of urban design and architecture. And I modestly thanked her and wanted to affirm that reason for inviting me to do this, and she said, no, I'm asking you because you're old. That was the truth, and the truth hurt. And then she said, no, what I really want you to do is answer the question of why the Lyndhurst Foundation 25 plus years ago placed such an important role or an important emphasis on urban design and urban planning as it invested in the renaissance of Chattanooga. I thought about it for a second, and that's a very important and very fun question, and it's a question that does not get asked or answered very often. And I think if you ask that question today, the answers would be the same as they were 25 years ago, which is to me underlines how important the questions are. I think that there are two real reasons why urban design and urban planning are important everywhere, but particularly in a place like Chattanooga. I suspect that so many of you who are professional planners and thinkers and architects and engineers and designers, these things are probably drilled into your brain and into your memory and into your DNA. They were not drilled into mine, and these are things that I've had the privilege of learning over 25 years. As I said, I think there are really two important reasons. One of them is very self-evident, and the other, to me, took a lot more reflection and a lot of experience over 25 years to really see the importance of what's going on here. The self-evident answer is that good urban design and good planning are perhaps the most important tools in the toolbox for a city to define itself, for a city to identify itself as unique in the world, and in modern parlance, for a city to establish its brand. That's what you can do with good urban design and urban planning. Stop and think about it just for a minute, as I'm sure everyone in this room has. You don't travel to New Orleans or Charleston or Savannah or San Francisco or Chicago or Seattle to drive down its major urban migratory corridors. That's not why you go there. You go there because all of those cities have wonderful senses of place. You go there to see what makes them them. And that is great architecture, great urban design, great urban planning, and a great sense of history. That's what you do when you commit yourself to doing these things well, often, and correctly. Remarkably and wonderfully, our city over the last 25 years has made some extraordinary urban design decisions, and at the time we probably did not know that's what we were doing. I think that some of the things we've done to define ourselves in the last 25 years have made more of a difference to this city than anything we've done in the previous century, and yet we did not even know they were urban design and urban planning. The first thing that occurs to me is the Moccasin Bend Task Force, which was chartered more than 25 years ago to address a mighty task, and that was to look at this extraordinary resource of 600 or 700 acres of Moccasin Bend, pristine, undeveloped land in a spectacular setting, and figure out how to develop it, because that was going to be the salvation of the city of Chattanooga. That's what that committee was charged to do. Well, what did they do? They reflected, they gathered, they met, they talked, they brought in experts, and they completely threw out any thought of Moccasin Bend. They came back to this community and said, forget about Moccasin Bend, put it in the warehouse, put it in the inventory for the future. Instead, return to the river. Look at the natural resource that is the reason for Chattanooga being here. Go embrace it. Go incorporate that into everything you do, and then you will begin to find yourself. Was that urban planning, urban design? I didn't know it at the time. I don't think any of us, probably intuitive geniuses like Rick Montague and Jack McDonald and some of the others on that committee figured it out at the time, but I certainly didn't understand that. Well, what came of that recommendation? You don't have to look around or walk around very far to suddenly start recognizing urban planning. Here's a Tennessee River Park. Here's a Tennessee Aquarium. Here's a Coolidge Park. Here is the city on the river that is now a benchmark for towns all over the country and all over the world to come to Chattanooga. Walk across the Walnut Street Bridge on any night of the year and soak in what it means to you as a Chattanoogan. To me, those places, the Riverwalk, the Aquarium Plaza, the spaces that downtown have become, the Bluff View area, the residential areas up at in the Walnut Commons area, all of those things scream, you are in Chattanooga and we are glad you are here. That's brilliant urban planning and urban design that we did not understand until we lived in it and experienced it. Those things to me are urban planning written very large. The urban design, or the design component, to me is something that's far more personal and far more intimate. And there have been really cool things done by many of you in this room, in this town over the last 25 years that we probably now have woven them into our subconscious. We're not aware of them, we don't think about them, but we appreciate them every day. For example, walk over the Market Street Bridge sometime or go into Coolidge Park. And if you go into Coolidge Park, really at any season of the year, but summertime is perhaps the most spectacular of all. You walk into that incredible place. It's bookended on either end by bridges that are marvels of art and architecture and engineering. You see this wonderful open space, almost always filled with, except sometimes late at night, filled with laughing and families enjoying themselves, having a great time. You see kids playing in the fountains. You see an incredible handcrafted carousel, a beautiful public meeting building over there. And all of those things soak into you, and again, makes you very proud to be here in Chattanooga and makes you have a sense of wonder. But I suspect a lot of you don't know that if you retreat, if you could float in a balloon above it, or better yet, walk on the Walnut Street Bridge above it and look down, you will see a star pattern repeated throughout the meanderings of that park. Over and over and over again, there is a star. Is it just a star? No. It's the star of the Medal of Honor. It's the star that Charles Coolidge won for his service to this country in World War II. Bob Franklin and the people at Franklin & Associates integrated that design into the whole park for all of us to enjoy for the rest of time, urban design at its very best, and we take it for granted. Walk across this side of the river and go across the Holmberg Bridge. You know, it's a great thing. It scares people. Kids love it. People have fun. It's just an amazing space. You get an extraordinary 360-degree panorama of the river, of the Hunter Museum, of the of the downtown that has grown up around. It's incredible. And then stop and look down at the supports that hold that bridge up. It could have been a T-shaped I-beam held up by a concrete girder. It's not. It's an architectural design that is intended to echo the bluffs that are just about 100 yards away. Again, urban design, recognizing a sense of place and incorporating that into something we do every day. Another example would be Miller Plaza. Way back in the 70s, Miller Park was built, and Miller Park was seen as an extraordinary downtown oasis. There were big, beautiful trees and wonderful landscape planting and flowers that came out in the spring and a beautiful waterfall. Everybody said downtown Chattanooga has a pulse. There's finally life in downtown Chattanooga, and up to that point there really wasn't. It was so successful and so popular, we began to talk about, let's do another one. Let's build Miller Park 2 across the street. And money was raised, the lands were slowly assembled, and the design was well underway. And it was probably getting very close to the point of construction. And again, Rick Montague, who is responsible for so much of this, under the influence of a lot of urban planners and designers and consultants who were talking to Lyndhurst way back when, said, no, you do not want to build another rural replica here. You've done that. You've got Miller Park across the street. Miller Plaza should be urban. And everyone said, what does that mean? It should have buildings. It should have architectural form. It should have shapes and places that are pleasing to the eye. It should have a performance stage. And believe me, this was controversial. This was to the trustees of the Tonya Foundation, which was a major funder at that time, and to the Lyndhurst trustees and people who were in love with Miller Park, that seemed crazy. Why are we tearing down buildings to build buildings? Well, now Miller Plaza is the scene every Friday night of the entire summer where thousands of people flock to enjoy our downtown in the free Nightfall concerts. And virtually every day of the year, people are in Miller Plaza enjoying that magnificent urban space which looks out across MLK to the beautiful pastoral Miller Park. Incredible, wonderful urban design that we all take for granted, but it did not come that way. It was an intentional act of a lot of smart people working very hard to do things that we all benefit from today. I've gotten this far without my glasses. Several minutes ago I said there were two reasons. I've covered one, the very self-evident. That's an ability of the city's ability to proclaim itself, and that's what good urban design is about. The second reason requires deeper reflection and a little bit deeper gaze. The answer to me is that good urban design promotes a good, strong downtown. Well, so what? What does it mean to have a good, strong downtown? Is it more important to have a good, strong downtown than to have a good, strong suburb? I don't want to step on toes here because many of us live in suburbs, but I think the answer to that is a very powerful yes. It is important to have a strong downtown. Why? What's important about a strong downtown? If you look back at Lyndhurst over the last 25 years, you will see several major themes reflected in the grant making of the foundation. We've invested heavily in public education. We've invested heavily in Chattanooga's arts and cultural organizations. We've invested heavily in environmental and land conservation causes. We've invested heavily in downtown neighborhoods. And we've invested very heavily in downtown revitalization through the work of the River City Company. Why did we do that? Well, if you take a balloon up to 10,000 feet and look down and try to connect those themes, I think you will begin to see some of what has connected them inside of Lyndhurst, probably again subconsciously to all of us. Consider just for a moment what it means when you have a strong downtown where a community lives, works, and plays. Well, here are just a couple of things that it means. It means less urban sprawl. It means less automobile travel. It means less consumption of energy. It means less time, particularly for parents, to spend in their cars driving from school to shop, to work, to ball field, to church, back to ball field, back to school. Those things don't happen when you live, work, and play close to the heart of downtown. It means less conversion of suburban and rural land from agricultural, open space, and wildlife habitat. Very, very importantly, it means improved social interactions for all walks of life. Just think for a minute of the few hours that you spend at Coolidge Park, or bicycling on the Riverwalk, or taking a leisurely stroll across the Walnut Street Bridge. Usually the mix of folks that you see and the sounds that you hear in those environments is a lot more interesting than you're likely to run into at home in your neighborhood. Strong downtowns also mean reduced cost of governmental services. Nobody ever talks about this very much, but it's a whole lot less expensive to provide roads and sewers and schools and fire and police protection and recreational amenities to a strong downtown core than it is to far-flung subdivisions. When you realize the mathematical truth that as the radius of a city expands, it expands geometrically, you realize what I'm talking about. A city with a 1 mile radius covers 2.4 square miles, 2.14 square miles. A city with a 2 square mile radius covers 4 times that much. So a strong downtown urban core is just a more efficient place to live. There are probably a dozen other examples. Improved public education. Lyndhurst and many others invested very strongly in the Battle Academy and the Brown Academy, and think what that has meant to people who lived downtown and to people who have moved downtown. The initial advent of the CSAS and then later Normal Park, all of these downtown schools, that was unthinkable 20 years ago. And think what that has meant for our community's support for public education and our benefit from public education. There are probably many other examples of how a strong urban core benefits every component of our community and has informed so much of Lyndhurst's work over the last 25 years. I'd be giving Lyndhurst too much credit if I said that we had figured that out 25 years ago. We certainly did not. I know I did not, and I've learned a great deal listening to people, watching the work that you guys do, and living and working and playing in my hometown. And I think that's my final point, that I know that I will know a whole lot more about good urban design and good urban planning when tonight is over than I did when I woke up this morning. Good urban design and good urban planning is a lot like evolution. You always have to continue moving onward. You've got to commit yourself and your city to doing the best you can do, because the world never stops and you can't ever fall behind. Well, that's enough for me. Y'all didn't come to hear me, although you now have. And I have the privilege now of introducing Alex Krieger. I thought this would be easy, and I knew that his resume, when sent to me, would probably be about 8 pages long, and I could cull it down to his most significant accomplishments. But extraordinarily, when I got the resume from Kim by email, it mentions almost nothing of Alex's life, his work, his accomplishments, his awards. The few facts that I can glean from it are that he attended Cornell University, where he got, let me find it, he obtained his Bachelor of Architecture at Cornell, then his Master of City Planning and Urban Design at Harvard, and then he began teaching at Harvard in the exact same year that I started in law school. I think what that means is that Alex is a few years older than I, and I know that it means he was a lot smarter than I then, and he's still a lot smarter than I am today. Other than that, the facts on his resume are few and far between. For our purposes here tonight, the ones that jump out to me is that he served as the director of the National Endowment of the Arts Mayor's Institute in City Design from 1994 to 1999. He is the founder and the co-director of the Large City Planners Institute from 1999 through the present. He is the vice president of the New England Holocaust Museum from 1989 through 2000. He is also a member of the Joseph Riley Institute, the mayor of Charleston, from 2000 through the present. These are things that tell me he knows what he's doing and that he has a lot to offer to us. But again, they're not the kind of hard facts that you expect to jump off of a resume. So I looked at it again and tried to see what I was missing, and I realized I missed the most important thing, which is in the very first sentence. It's a very simple sentence. Alex has combined a career of teaching and practice, dedicating himself in both to understanding how to improve the quality of place and the quality of life in our major urban areas. And I think that says it all. Alex, thank you.
Public health care for people seems to be very controversial around the country, but health care for our cities is, I think, sort of beyond debate. American cities need all the care and love that they can get. I want to thank the people who invited me, Ann Coulter, Kim, Christian, and perhaps others. I've known about Chattanooga for a long time. I've known Scott Watson for a long time. I've known some of the designers that have worked on your great places. I've collaborated with some of them, but I've never been to your town until today. And as I was given a wonderful tour today, I realized that I'm about to tell you what you already know. I'm not sure you will learn all that much new, but again, it's important to hear things several times so that they stick, and also so that you don't stop doing what you've been doing for the past 25 years, as Ellen mentioned. And so the sort of subtitle of my talk is then the importance of designing your city wisely and continue to keep doing it, as opposed to feeling confident about what you've done. Cities are extremely dynamic, and they change even quicker than humans do, though sometimes we doubt that fact. All right, so I'm going to start with a little bit of history about why it is difficult for Americans to appreciate cities and why we are now starting to do so and will continue to do so throughout the 21st century. I've just returned from Portland, and I found this sign. And I thought it would be a great starting place. I'm not sure that, actually, Portland is not weird at all, although I believe what they mean is here that they want to continue to be distinctive. Portland is actually a great environment. It has one of the, it's sort of mythic for its growth boundary that controls sprawl, at least to some extent. It has wonderful public spaces. It has a fabulous transit system. They are a bit weird about standing in long lines outside of what is called Voodoo Donuts. I'm not sure why that's the case, but other than that, I don't think Portland is weird at all. It's a great environment. Atlanta I find weird, actually. And I thought I might get a laugh down here, right? I'm not sure why my colleague is walking on the 10th floor of a parking garage to get to that building rather than on the street where people belong. If you Google Atlanta images, it's all about highways. I'm not sure why that's the case, why they're so proud of their highways as opposed to where people live and so forth. So I think that's weird. I think this is very weird. And this actually is, I hate to admit it, this is sort of within a couple of miles of where I live. So there's a perfect 50s sort of Levittown type house, and this family thought that they should, expand a bit. That's a bit weird, as opposed to Portland. Notice the kind of, not SUV, whatever it's called, SUV parked in the front. Sometimes, of course, Americans just forget about the house entirely and just get a big vehicle and call it a day there, and that's a bit weird, actually. But it's been long sort of placed in our public consciousness that cities are bad for you and something else is better. Mr. Henry Ford, actually, I suppose, thinking about things like this, right? Saying, we shall solve the problem of the city by leaving the city. And he was not the only one who voiced such an opinion. Here's American Progress, famous painting from the 19th century. What is American Progress doing? Look, with her laptop in hand, not yet wireless, I guess. What is she doing in this image? She's leaving St. Louis, is what she's doing. And, sort of, whatever, brushing heathens aside, she's going to make a better place somewhere else, in this case, most surely California. So what we've been doing as a culture is abandoning the very places we've built in order to follow a kind of a conceit that suggests that we can build something better somewhere else, newer, better, and so forth. That's not a very good way of being sustainable, even about a culture, much less about things like energy. So again, this kind of thinking actually has been more prolific in this country, especially during the late 19th, early 20th, and throughout the 20th century, although it's changing a bit right now. Here's one more. This is a government document. This is a government document by a department called the Resettlement Administration. President Roosevelt's on the heels of the Depression. The Resettlement Administration. And look at what it's telling Americans. Life by the square foot, in other words, life in cities, sucks. It doesn't quite say that, but you sort of get the point, right? And life by the acre is, of course, what the American dream is all about. And life by the acre has very little to do with, of course, what you've been building in downtown Chattanooga. And there it is. There's life by the kitchen acre. This is a fabulous advertisement for a home builder in the 1950s, and why not? Why would you not love this place and this lovely housewife who, of course, manages the kitchen by the acre? And even Dr. Seuss got into the routine as well. It's opener there in the wide open air, and that's where Americans have tended to go over the course of the past 200 years. But something is happening, and it's not just the economy, although it helps, actually. Something is happening to start to change this kind of mindset that Americans have grown up with and have acted upon. By the way, the result of all this, it's opener there in the open air, is environments like this. And surely there are some around here, though I was happily just toured around the downtown area today. So our homes are there, and our shopping is there, and our working is there, and our recreating when we have some time is somewhere else. Not a particularly wonderful environment to share experiences or even to kind of move about efficiently. So again, this has been America, and 90% of us live in places like this, and there are many good reasons why. And Americans have profited economically and other ways from building such an environment. But the end of this, it'll still be the prevalent way Americans live, but it will no longer be, if you believe me at least, the singular ideal upon which American culture is based upon, as it was throughout most of the 20th century. By the way, what about the city? When we're building these things, well, the city was left to be cleared and renewed, and the city was left to others who couldn't, of course, afford the American dream. Some of you are old enough to remember something like this. The city of New York in the 1970s was facing foreclosure, not foreclosure, whatever, bankruptcy, and was the mayor was asked the federal government for a bailout, and of course, President Ford at the time said something like this. It was embellished by the Daily News, of course, but something like this. So in the 1950s and 60s and 70s and 80s, the city was not a place to treasure. It was not a place to hang out. It was a place to abandon as soon as you could for life by the acre, which seemed to be a better way of living than in the old decrepit city with people unlike yourselves, ourselves. But look at this ad. It's a cosmetic called Urban Decay. Isn't that fabulous? You would not have seen such an ad in the 1980s, I assure you. Urban Decay. I wonder what the fragrance is like. And look at this. There's Zippy the Pinhead telling you what's bad for you, the suburb, and what's good for you. Well, it looks like downtown Chattanooga, doesn't it? That cartoon would not have appeared 20 years ago, 15 years ago, 30 years ago. In fact, if it would have appeared, the labels would have been reversed. And look at this fabulous scene. It looks just like out of a movie. Does anyone recognize this? Actually, it is a stage set. Somebody, I suppose, read Zippy the Pinhead and built a shopping mall. The center of which is this kind of faux street, right? There it is, actually. See, on the outskirts, it's just the same old thing. Big boxes and lots of parking, but the impression it now wishes to make at the center is of a good old-fashioned street, just like the ones we've abandoned all over urban America, but you've managed to preserve several and improve upon them. So things are a-changing, as somebody once said. Look at this. If you're a certain age, for example, my age, Leave It to Beaver and My Three Sons and all those great, and Father Knows Best were all wonderful TV sitcoms placed in the great suburbs. We were living in the cities, but we were admiring all this fabulous living that was taking place out there, healthy family life. If you're a bit younger, say my kids, well, you think that there's sex in the city. And it's true. or rather, I should clarify, cities are sexy. And if you've grown up in the suburbs, not particularly sexy. And what's become exotic for the generations of people who grew up in the suburbs is, of course, the opposite. The vitality and proximity to people and so forth. And so they're friends, and they're Mr. Seinfeld and so forth. And so TV is now full of sitcoms set in urban America, mostly New York, but we'll try to forgive them for that, as opposed to out on the outskirts, on Long Island or whatever. And so that's a very significant change as well. And speaking of sex, Las Vegas. Look at this image. This is a just completed project, and it's called City Center. I find that incredibly revealing. So the city is now a theme in Las Vegas, just like volcanoes or, Roman ruins and all the rest of it. The city is now a theme. You all, not you, I mean, not you, all those folks who live in suburbs now go to Las Vegas to experience a city, or at least as imagined by these designers, looking a bit, again, like New York, all full of kind of curtain wall buildings and so forth. With a monorail, by the way, in between. So again, it is. It's just not finished. You don't see it yet. It's not finished yet. Some of you may have gone to Las Vegas and have discovered a city at City Center. So, is the suburban dream, as Newsweek some years ago actually predicted, was bye-bye? Well, no. And yet, look at this ad, right? Metropolis as a perfume. And so I'm about to switch then from this little history lesson to tell you how to maintain health in our cities, even though, in our center cities, even though, of course, somewhere between 85 and 90% of Americans will still go out to the burbs. But if 10% more than half of 300 million choose the other, it's a significant number, which bodes very well for the maintenance and kind of resurrection, if you will, of our center cities. All right, so I'm going to sort of come up with sort of 8 indicators of city center health. And of course, having read all the material that was sent to me by Ann and others, I realized that you've all done all this stuff. So again, think of this as a reminder, because some people say you've forgotten some of these things in the last few years and are worth reminding yourself about. So the first of these, and it's not often thought about as the first sign of health in cities. People think of jobs. In the future, cities will not be where the jobs are. They're not even already, as historically they were. The first thing is about living. Living first is actually the slogan for the city of Vancouver. And if you visit it, you realize what a fabulous place it was. Think about a city calling itself, having it as its slogan, living first, not jobs first, not shopping first, not commerce first, not kind of whatever, government first, living first. What a refreshing idea that is about thinking about cities. And I'll get back to that point in a second. Right? There's a lovely lady selling condos in Miami, and the ad begins by saying, look, it's the triumphant return of an endangered species, the urban dweller. And they have been endangered, but they're coming back. By the way, I met this woman's mother at a talk recently, or at least she identified herself as the mother. So if you recognize anyone in these photographs, come by and tell me how you're related to them. But of course, you see, she doesn't say, I live in Miami. I live in the Everglades, right? And here's the kind of the rub, right? Americans want it both ways, right? She's moving to Miami, but she's moving to, of course, a place that's on the coast, facing an ocean, maybe tall enough in this skyscraper to see back towards the Everglades. So as the kind of migration moves back towards the city, there's a kind of a desire for something that, of course, the suburb was always attractive about. And again, we'll get back there in a second. So there it is, the endangered species, the urban dweller. And around the world, of course, the healthiest cities are those that have vital, often historic, sometimes new residential neighborhoods. So stop talking about jobs. Yes, it's important, but find a way to attract more people to live in the downtown area. And of course, it's Vancouver up on top. It's Cairo, just out of the blue. It's a little section of Pittsburgh, which I'll get to later, which is building lots of housing downtown over former steel mills, which are not coming back. They hoped they would for about 50 years, but they're not. But housing is. And, you know, even in Florida, look at those little townhomes. Actually kind of cheaply built, but of course, again, like the woman in the little snake-like dress of hers. She sort of lives on the river, not actually in the city. It's a kind of a urban housing at the moment is a kind of a, needs to be thought about almost as like a halfway house for recovering suburbanites, right? And of course you have to think of it almost that way, right? Okay, so one of the things we're not doing very well is being able to attract a diverse enough audience, diverse enough citizenry to return to our cities. We tend to think about lofts or skyscrapers, at least in bigger cities. That's Seattle, which is overbuilt housing. That's my home up there. I live there in the city of Boston. It's a two-family house. I happen to proudly own it, and I rent the lower floor, and guess what? That kind of helps the mortgage quite a bit. And below, another wonderful sort of invention of the Northeast called the triple-decker. And the city of Boston and Providence are full of these things. And they're fabulous affordable housing. But we've sort of lost our way to build affordable housing because we've discovered lofts, unfortunately. And we've outpriced, of course, most people from being able to live in a downtown area. I'm all for reviving the triple-decker. What was a triple-decker, by the way? It's 3 units, 3 identical units. And oftentimes, of course, sometimes 3 families live there quite nicely in 2- and 3-bedroom apartments. Sometimes a person owned this thing, and then the granny lived on the 2nd floor, or they lived on the 2nd floor and their kids lived below, or they rented the other 2 flats, and therefore were able to afford it while providing 2 relatively inexpensive apartments for others. So one of the things that we've lost as a culture, even as we're re-experiencing the city, is our ability to build affordable housing in the downtown, and that's at the moment one of the if you will, kind of one of the things that prevent more people from, of course, returning and begin to enjoy urban life. And that's a big problem. Now, why do I think that the suburbs are not dying exactly, but sort of on the way out a little bit? It's because this scene, another great advertisement for homes from the 1950s, is no longer as common as you all might think. In fact, the nuclear family, a couple of kids, mom at home, dad proudly earning the big bucks, that represents it's even less than that now, somewhere between 15 and 18% of new households in America. Think about that. We think it's 60% or 80%. By the way, the people who build homes for us think it's 100%, because that's what they do, build homes for families in the burbs, right? It's less than 18%. And the other households are made up of course, empty nesters up there, various couples, gay or otherwise, that young lady who's living in the Everglades in her wonderful costume there. Those folks represent 78%, 82%. I took a red eye here, so you'll have to forgive me. From Seattle, not from Boston. So you have to forgive me a little bit. So think about that. So if you believe that the predominant need to house people is for a nuclear family, you build suburbs. You build lots of bedrooms, you build fresh air, or you go to where fresh air is, you build a nice little comfy yard, and so forth. But for 82% of the households being formed in this country right now, that's not an ideal. For some it might be, but for others it's not. You don't need the big bedrooms, you don't need the big yard, you don't need to kind of commute very far. You want to have proximity to restaurants or museums or healthcare or sometimes golf courses, I guess, right? So this is something that's not fully understood, actually, by our home building industry right now. I have a 17-year-old son. I'm going to knock on wood because actuarial tables suggest that he will be able to live into his 90s. Certainly hope so, right? The percentage of his lifespan devoted to child rearing, for which the suburb is a pretty darn good place, is much, much smaller than for some of you, certainly smaller than for your parents, certainly smaller than for your grandparents. So, back in the 1940s, after the war, I mean, what you went to school, maybe you went to the army for 2 years, you shacked up, you had kids, they grew up, they left, you died. Kind of, right? The majority of your life, the largest percentage of your life was dedicated towards child rearing. And the suburb is utopia for child rearing, at least for most people. as opposed to, dirty urban streets and not enough open space and covered, fenced yards and all the rest of it, good schools, whatever, right? Proximity to healthy air and so forth. But folks are staying young much longer these days. And for them, the suburb, probably Sex in the City, appeals to them a little bit more than a quarter-acre lot. And that couple there, after their kids go away, lives for another 30, 40, sometimes 50 years. And the suburb for them is not necessarily ideal. And yes, some of them go to Florida. But a lot of empty nesters actually work their way back to urban situations. Again, to be close to cultural activities, to close to superb health care, close to maybe their kids who happen to starting their careers there and so forth. So think about that. So if you think about, again, a culture that is dominated by the period of one's life that you breed kids, the suburb will remain the predominant form, as long as we have enough energy and all the rest of it. But if you think about the much longer beginning of life until you start a family, and the much longer time you have after your family, your offspring leave you, those kinds of places to live bode well, or the desire for those places bode well for our cities. So this is one of those things that we have not yet sort of caught up yet to the fact that 82% of households are not families. And for them, a suburban home is not necessarily the best place, although some, of course, still do. But what about the rest? And that's where I think, of course, what you've been doing in Chattanooga and what we've been doing in Boston and a few other cities that have thought about this, they're providing the alternatives that the 20th century has not provided for us, given this sensibility that the suburbs are about families, and families are a predominant percentage of households in America. All right, I think I've spent a bit more time than I should have on that point, right? But it's very important. All right, so what are the challenges, obviously, to living first? Well, there are many. You have to respond. It's not for everyone, so make sure that you build housing for those who, of course, want to, desire to, and hopefully can afford to live in cities. Maintaining affordability is a big, big challenge, which we've not figured out quite yet, because, of course, land values in downtowns are very high. There's usually some need for gap financing and others such as subsidies, which are hard to come by, especially when the economy is not doing very well. And then, of course, there's still this kind of latent and not always so latent continuing fear about the city as being about crime and congestion and other no good things, including bad schools and so forth. And, in fact, although it isn't mentioned as often, still the suburbs about demographic and racial and ethnic segregation, as opposed to a city where we, of course, share across those demographic lines. So there are many challenges. And yet, of course, the fact that 82% of households are not at least formed by nuclear families suggests that more housing by hook or crook will be built in cities as opposed to suburbs in the next couple of decades. I seem to be losing my voice. Is there a way to get a little bit of water? Excuse me. All right. Well, the second sort of health indicator, and again, you're very well aware of this, is making sure that you sort of understand for whom the urban lifestyle appeals, and to provide the various amenities. Thank you very much. Provide the various amenities that those folks, those urbans, as a friend of mine in Detroit calls them, those urbans require, right? Boston, actually, just to kind of brag about it for a second, figured it out a bit early, actually, maybe as early as you all here in Chattanooga. For instance, again, thinking about the kind of the halfway houses for recovering suburbanites, Boston took what was a very decrepit, abandoned a port, of course things went elsewhere, and started to kind of do three things. Make it public, and then three ways. By creating lots of open space at the water's edge, in our case an ocean, in your case rivers, by putting institutions. This was kind of the first of the kind of big glass tank Aquaria in Boston for late 1960s, and of course reusing old abandoned warehouses and factories and so forth, and depots into housing. Those things, those are old warehouses. Those are one of the most expensive places to live in Boston right now. Millions of dollars. I certainly could not afford that. But the combination of making formerly inaccessible areas public, which of course are treasured by Americans, near open space, making them for residences, even more so than for jobs that might not even come back or be attracted back, and creating a substantial amount of public open space there, began to be a formula, and you've used it as well, to sort of turn backs to fronts. You know, rivers and other such bodies of water were once kind of working areas, and the cities turned their backs to them. That was a place for labor, not for life. Well, of course, those places are now for life. Labor is elsewhere. And so the ability to kind of turn yourself inside out as a city begins to be a very common device to reattract people to enjoy the benefits of living in urban America. There's also, of course, the issue about trying to what some people call the creative class and some people call by various other names, the idea about trying to attract the various new industries that treasure and bank upon interaction and interdisciplinarity. In the case of Boston, of course, our biotech cluster is very important to us, and we try very hard to make sure that we deal well with it and organize it, and organize transit to serve it, and provide new spaces for it. So again, to be mindful of kind of the healthy cities, it's not that jobs aren't important, it's to think about which sectors you can attract and love in the process of embracing them and providing the amenities that they desire beyond the workplace itself. Now, what are the challenges there? Well, of course, understanding, identifying, and responding to those who are urban-minded, not hardly everyone in the country, attract as businesses that flourish through the exchange with sort of kindred industries. Of course, investing in various forms of alternate energy, which I'll get in a second, and so forth. So again, many challenges, and yet it is important for the health of cities to identify those who are urban-minded, and there are more of those folks out there now than certainly there were a decade or two or three or four ago. But make sure you don't just attract a particular kind of individual. So here's, I think, a terrible cartoon, but it happens to have a ring of truth about it. So let's read it together. Whites live in cities, the crowning glory of civilization, certainly Manhattan or Shanghai or Seoul and so forth. Minorities move into cities. Hello, goodbye. You know who says that? Whites flee cities to suburbs, and they say, it's better. Of course, yes, it's life by the acre. Whites move into second-ring suburbs. Cities are dead, as President Ford said. This is better still. Minorities move into first-ring suburbs. This is better, I guess, they say. And then the punchline, whites move back into cities and say it worked, right? And then the little fellow down there says, the vast white ring conspiracy. Now, you're not laughing. It's not actually funny. And one of the problems with our return of interest in cities is making sure that they are available still to many, as opposed to a particular segment of the population. A brilliant, brilliant cartoon of some cities that have invested substantially into kind of very high-end, either jobs or housing, and therefore, in fact, have made it more difficult for those people who sustained the cities for decades priorly from being able to stay there in these new fabulous loft buildings. All right, the third sort of indicator of health, again, you all know, is, of course, to create density, to create overlap of activities, not mixed-use buildings. I mean, come on. I mean, how many mixed-use buildings can you have? Mixed-use neighborhoods are very, very essential. Mixed use in terms of who lives there, in terms of the kind of housing provided, and the kind of amenities that take place there. And be very, and there, not be too conservative, as opposed to be very tasteful. Right? The city of Louisville, I don't know how many of you have you visited it, the city of Louisville, about your size, although bigger now because it sort of has a consolidated government, bigger in terms of overall population, has done this in a very brilliant way, in my opinion. Along their main street and towards the river, they've sort of invented a bunch of kind of incredible institutions by hook or crook. I'll just identify some of them. By the way, they're riverfront, designed by the very same people that designed a good section of yours. You can tell by the steps, right, and the angles and the bumpy topography, right? They invented a Muhammad Ali museum because, of course, he was born in Louisville. They recruited back from Indiana. They stole from Indiana, just across the Ohio River, the Louisville Slugger bat manufacturer. Fabulous thing to do. Of course, it should be in Louisville, not in Indiana somewhere. And of course, along their main street, they were very careful to preserve and reuse many of their older sort of 19th century warehouse buildings. But the effect is amazing because they were not shy about adding the new to the old. So, of course, next to the new bat factory, and that's where bats are actually being made now, they put a big bat up there. It's fabulous. Of course, strict preservationists probably were like, shaking to their very roots. But it's a fabulous thing to both identify this institution and to animate a public street, a historic street. They found ways of reusing older buildings, in this case introducing lofts up above and a kind of glass factory that inhabited the neighborhood and put it back in there. That involves, of course, a commercial enterprise as well as actually glass blowers. So a fabulous mixed-use building, making glass, selling glass, and of course living up above. And they're not shy about being kind of funky, maybe weird, as the Portlandians wish to call themselves. This is the best little boutique hotel anywhere outside of Manhattan. And it has these fabulous penguins all over this historic building. And there's works of art in everyone's room and so forth. So Louisville is a wonderful historic city that loves to live in the 21st century, not by destroying its history, but of course by adding culture, contemporary culture to it. And that's a kind of a wonderful lesson right there as well about life moving on as opposed to somehow being static. Urbanism is not about a static nature of existence. So what are the challenges involved in sort of this indicator? Well, again, enabling more responsive zoning sometimes to allow such things to happen. Non-traditional financing mechanisms are required to get some of these things going on. And of course, seeking out various nonprofit and other unconventional partners with which to kind of restore and re-inhabit urban cities. And you've done it very well in this town as well. The fourth sort of indicator, again, all of these you are very well aware of, maybe even sort of invented some of them or began to think about them earlier than many other cities, was, of course, to think compactly. This is a very difficult thing for Americans to do because, of course, they've been sold on the idea of life by the acre as opposed to by the square foot. Cities are life by the square foot. And there's great joy in that, though we worry about, of course, congestion and fear it above almost all else, right? So what does this mean? Well, in this case, I wanted to show you a project of ours in D.C. It has something to do with minding the gap. By the way, if those of you, I don't know whether you recognize that symbol. If you've gone to London and taken the tram, there's signs like this everywhere, meaning be careful before you step off the platform onto the rail. So you're minding the gap. But it's a fabulous little slogan for America, urban America, mind the gap between things. Fill things in rather than spread things apart. So in Washington, we've been working for the past actually almost 10 years on minding the various gaps in the city. Parts of the city have grown remarkably diverse financially and culturally in other ways, but of course the south end, the sort of south part of the city, has not. So this is a project about minding the gap and restoring South Capitol Street and converting it into a proper boulevard, which is happening right now. And in the process, and I assume you may have something like this here, a downtown bid has been created. But what is happening recently, of course, is trying to kind of combine the bid, the Business Improvement District, from the north side of the mall across to the south side. The mall, fabulous though it is actually a DMZ. The north, the downtown, is very separate from the stuff below it, to the south. So this business improvement district, which we helped found, was about minding that gap, minding that monumental gap, and trying to kind of create various connections along streets, open spaces across the mall, so that both sides of the city can be, in some ways, kind of reunited. A very important thing, to mind the gap and fix those gaps in cities. Challenges, at least in Washington, had to do with various kind of intergovernmental cooperation. Again, overcoming the fear of congestion, deeply held by many Americans. One more building will create 6 more cars, will create much more traffic and so forth. We all believe this, and therefore prevent sometimes from minding those gaps or filling those gaps. And remembering what streets are for, which is not for cars. Streets are to experience the joys of urban living and the various activities, amenities that a street provides along one's path. So streets are not about a destination. Streets are about the joy of the walk along them, that we really think about streets in those ways today. Okay. Well, the fifth one is pretty obvious. Keep investing in culture. Because, of course, the sort of 24/7 phenomena we talk about is about recreation or living as much as it is about labor. And those become more intertwined in the modern era than perhaps they were a generation or a century ago. Right? Some of you probably have heard or have visited Bilbao, which has made a kind of remarkable transformation. It's a Spanish city, northern city, and everyone thinks that the museum did it. Well, the museum, the kind of Frank Gehry Museum, was the symbol, was the status symbol of the resurgence of Bilbao. But under a very complicated set of plans, they minded the gap. They moved their port. They put more housing in. They built lots of open spaces, more new housing. They did lots of things to have the city recover from its kind of long malaise. It was sort of the Pittsburgh of Spain. It was the steel building city. And the museum was not the end product. The museum was a kind of one of the many catalysts and a symbol of the resurgence of the city, but not the only thing that placed it back on the map, and that's very important to remember. I heard today about how maybe there should be a little bit more synergy between the university and the downtown. They're very close, and yet somehow not enough interaction takes place. Well, that's true in many places, but here's an example from Baton Rouge, which has LSU about 2.5 miles from the downtown, and the downtown is foundering a little bit. Well, in this case, of course, what LSU managed to be convinced of doing is building an arts center and a small little program related to the arts, curatorial arts, and be convinced to place it downtown. And of course, in the process, they updated an old building, but of course they put a very modern-looking building up on top and around it. And this, just by this small little kind of conjoining of university and downtown, a substantial amount of interaction now takes place. The roof of that old building is now one of the kind of best places in all of probably Louisiana to go and sip a cup of, well, whatever they sip, and look out over the Mississippi and enjoy the downtown. So sometimes it takes a relatively small device. In this case, no great department, no big housing project, no great dormitories moved from LSU downtown, but a particular institution that, of course, fits in a downtown, a cultural institution, that starts to create that kind of synergy. And over time, of course, classes are beginning to be held, at least related to, kind of, to the fine arts program, as well as bring some students along with others that enjoy the facility itself. So think about how you can move the university downtown, but what parts of it might in fact initiate the minding of the gap between the downtown and the university campus. This is one of my favorite European cities. I wish you all vacations there. This is Vienna, a beautiful classical city, But look at how they're bastardizing it. Pardon the equation, pardon the phrase. Look at that. They're not afraid to deal with it creatively. artistically. So when one says invest in culture, it doesn't mean some old fuddy-duddy museum only. It means allowing kind of life to appear in both sort of, wonderful and sometimes slightly funky ways. So one of the wonderful things about Vienna as you walk these historic streets is that you encounter things like this, strange bits of architecture amidst the classical buildings, wonderful little bars and so forth. Look at that kind of little roof attic over there in the kind of upper right. So investing in culture is investing in the kind of the innovation society and the artistic society, not only in the ways that we think about, oh yeah, artists like to live in loft buildings, but in the ability of sort of an artistic temperament to imbue life, continue to imbue life into cities, old and new. And this happens in many places. Something that our office did now about 15 years ago, transformed a dilapidated old port in Montreal that, because it was so empty, of course affected the historic neighborhood, the original neighborhood right beyond. So we used many of the artifacts of the old port to then create a park system, but without necessarily trying to kind of continue to recapture the industrial aesthetic. There's a kind of Cirque du Soleil right there. The point, you can't swim in the Montreal River there. There's, it's a little cold and all kinds of crappy things are in there. But we created an opportunity to appear as if you could. In other words, that area where you swim is actually a pool, but you feel like you're swimming in the St. Lawrence River. So think creatively as you preserve history, as opposed to embalm history, which is not the way of urbanism. The city of Dallas, amazing. They want to be better than the cities that they think are better kind of the East Coast. A fabulous ambition in Dallas. I wish we had as much of it in Boston these days. Have built an amazing arts district. Again, I encourage all of you to visit it. They've collected by now 6 Pritzker Prize winners, more than exist in any other street anywhere on the planet. And they're continuing to do so, largely through private donations. The last 2 of which are the Opera House by Norman Foster and an experimental theater by Rem Koolhaas. An amazing addition to their downtown, which, you can imagine was largely office buildings that everyone sort of left by 5 o'clock and never on the weekends. All of a sudden, that corridor with these cultural institutions have sort of reversed the fortunes of the downtown. So what are the challenges there? Well, obviously, many challenges. Figuring out the kinds of institutions that one can reattract or invent, even better invent, in order to kind of continue to make culture a dominant aspiration of downtown life in the cities. Please continue to invest, as you are doing with your free shuttle, for example, which I find marvelous, in alternative forms of mobility. Of course, another ad from the 1950s or 60s. Yeah, we laugh now, right? We certainly believed it for a long time. Can I show it to you again, right? It's drive more. It's cheaper by the mile. Doesn't happen to be true anymore. So again, Dallas, a sprawled American city, has invested heavily in transit and light rail systems. And by the way, who uses it? It's mostly used on Sundays at the moment, or to go to ballparks or to the theater, right? It's not necessarily yet convenient to everyone's homes. That's impossible. But we left our transit system slowly. We're going to return to them slowly as well. So now in Dallas, it's kind of a fun thing to do, not necessarily for commuting purposes only. And that's a very interesting lesson there as well. Washington, as I'm sure you know, has been the whole region has been sort of restructured as a consequence of the 1960s and 70s building of the metro system there. Now, it doesn't require big things to happen. Back to Pittsburgh, where we've worked for a long time, and through a sort of this kind of rediscovering, as you have, the rivers in Pittsburgh, as opposed to shying away from them because they were, of course, full of steel mills in the past. So a whole bunch of fabulous things, ballparks, football stadiums, convention centers, and so forth, have been built along the rivers. What we were able to do was try to discourage as much as possible lots of parking along those facilities. Why? Because, of course, if you're going to just come in and park and go, you're going to get back in your car and leave, and nothing else actually of benefit takes place. But Pittsburgh had this amazing little contraptions. You could see the little funiculars that got people to the steel mills from the hills where people lived, of course, to avoid the pollution of the steel mills. So we thought, great, we'll restore some of those things. So Pittsburgh is not about to kind of, invest gazillion dollars into, rail and so forth. No city can. But we restored a couple of these things, and look at what happens. And we kind of create a little bridge from where it once ended across the tracks, which have to remain. And that little riverboat is about to pick up people and deliver them, as you can see, to the venues across the river. Right? So you can see them arriving at the baseball stadium, arriving at the football stadium. They now arrive at the convention center as well. So the ability, of course, to avoid parking had a double benefit. Besides pollution, this and whatever else, right? It sort of created a fun way to arrive from the suburbs to discovering the city, which is what, where the football fans come from. They don't live in downtown Pittsburgh. So now in Pittsburgh, the idea about using the river for transit to get from their huge parking depositories along shopping centers on that side of the river, and they do so. And over time, over the 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years that this has been happening, all of a sudden a little bit of daily river circulation has emerged. So sometimes you don't have to invest substantially. You have to figure out how to creatively add mobility through other means besides, of course, the automobile. So those are now the kind of various spots that take you to various parts of the river, still generally for events rather than for commuters, but it's a way back to becoming transit used a bit more normally. And look at that, the scenes, people arrive by boats there. It's a fabulous scene whenever, of course, these events take place, and the arrival is by boat and by walking as opposed to by hundreds of thousands of cars. Amazing environment. The whole riverfront kind of comes to life because people arrive there by boat, large and small boat. So again, what are the challenges? Primarily altering habits, actually. But yes, indeed, for major infrastructural change, of course, funding is a major challenge. But look at how much fun this Pakistani family is having on their little motorbike, huh? Look at that little kid in front with his sunglasses, huh? It's a gas to be 5 on a motorcycle, as opposed to 1 person for each 2-ton vehicle. All right, I'm sure I've convinced you all. All right. 7, of course, is a real imperative, that we largely just use rhetoric so far, all right? I particularly like, well, you... some of you, I hope, know this. 13 trees, not very much, absorbs the carbon from 1 vehicle. So yes, go lead on your buildings, but that's not going to necessarily do all that much. You have to think about sustainability at a kind of a district level or a neighborhood level, a citywide level. And one of the best ways to deal with carbon is actually to plant more trees. Back to Baton Rouge. On the heels of course, the Katrina, Baton Rouge thought it was going to, take advantage of the fall of New Orleans. Well, it did for a while, but then, of course, the recession happened. So all kinds of big plans were happening in New Orleans. Now look at Baton Rouge. Look at the tree cover outside of the downtown area, and there are no trees inside. By the way, that's true of some of your downtown neighbors as well, right? Why is that? So one of the most important planning initiatives that you can begin is restoring Arbor Day, which used to be a holiday, a national holiday, where you planted a tree, not on your own property, but on the sidewalk outside of your house. And so the most important planning agenda in Baton Rouge right now is to restore its tree canopy. And they're embarked upon planting 100,000 trees in the downtown area. And of course, beyond eating lots of carbon, it would certainly make a much more gracious downtown, even if no new buildings are built, than what exists today. So there are many ways to think environmentally, not always having to do with new contraptions, a lot with common sense. Chicago, where I grew up, has received an awful lot of sort of publicity for the various good deeds that the mayor and others have done. build great parks, but the most important thing that Chicago has done under Mayor Daley's leadership is, of course, in completely changing the stormwater treatment systems, actually mandating green roofs for all public buildings, and now, of course, the tradition has spread to other buildings as well, for rebuilding streets to kind of be more efficient in terms of, again, water and sewerage. And all those things, I think, are as important a measure of environmental sustainability than getting a little silver LEED status for a building that may be using that much less energy, but of course doesn't contribute very much to the overall environment. So yes, what's the challenge there? Well, get past beyond the rhetoric of now all of us wishing to be green and starting to do something about it at the scale of the neighborhood or the downtown, not just the scale of individual cities. So I'm almost done. So the last thing is a little bit kind of maybe not even quite so rational. Don't recreate the suburb, although lots of cities in the downtown areas are doing precisely that, because they think that that's the way you would attract people who love the suburbs. Certainly learn from management systems and other things in the suburbs, but don't recreate them, because that's not what's going to make them a point of embarkation for those who grew up in the suburbs. You have to do something else. Whoops. Sorry. Right? This scene can never take place in a suburban environment. This happens to be Madison, Wisconsin, during a summer morning farmers market along their main street, which stretches about a mile, and all the way around the state capitol, all the way around the grounds. This scene cannot take place in suburban America. Right? So, the ninth and final indicator is to continue to invest, as you have over the past 25 years, continue to invest in public and private enterprises and in the public realm, which is what the city is about, as opposed to the private realm, which is where one lives away from the vitality of cities. So I wanted to end with just two projects, one of which is very modest, a little architecture effort from our office, and one in which I had very little role in, but I think is amazing, and I hope will inspire you. We just completed this building. It's a giant refrigerator from very modest budget. It's the food bank for New England. It collects food and distributes food to 300 shelters in eastern Massachusetts. So this organization had no money, not a lot of money. It had a crummy site, but of course next to it a very congested highway. That's where everyone goes to the Cape from Boston, right? Just outside of the downtown area. And so what we did was still try to invest in the public realm. And the way this was done here was these little, on a refrigerator, which cannot have windows, was to add these little tabs. These tabs are the same thing. They're about a foot high and 8 inches wide. The same material that you use on stop signs. They reflect, right? Headlights reflect the stop sign, right? And so as you drive by this building, it's like a little ticker tape. And the logo of the building reveals itself, this sort of shadow weaved. And look at what happens at night. So this is not glass, this is not mirrors, this is not windows, this is not some electricity. These are these little tabs that are given light by all those hundreds of thousands of cars that drive by there. So however humble the initiative might be, give something back to the public realm, because that's what urbanism is all about in the end. The priority given to what is public and shared as opposed to what is private. Now, let me end with this design. My role was being a judge on a competition for which the designers were. Look, this is in Seoul, Korea, one of the most congested in terms of automobile cities on the planet right now. If you travel in Asia right now, you realize that we have no traffic in the States. We have none. So look at this environment. It's 10 kilometers long, about 6 miles, 6.2 miles. And it is full of people now. Full of people along the entire 10 kilometers. It looks like a little river. It actually is essentially a pool. Now look at what it replaced. A few years ago, this was a highway. This was an elevated highway. Now, I bet you don't believe me yet, right? But this is the very same place, but I'll show you in a second. And a fairly courageous mayor of Seoul said, let's get rid of this highway. And people thought he was nuts. But he wasn't yet at his term limit. He was trained as a planner, by the way. He just said, let's get rid of the highway. And people thought that, oh my God, Armageddon would come, just like 2 weekends ago when, whatever, the LA highway was closed for 5 hours, right? But nothing happened there, right? So he just said, let's get rid of it. And traffic found its way elsewhere. So in fact, this was the alignment of an old little creek that connected, that drained the mountains into a major river in Seoul, which this is not. And of course, over time, like old creeks, it became a sort of an open sewer, and of course needed to be kind of improved upon. And so first it was covered by a surface road, and then of course as traffic demands necessitated, it gained an elevated road, and something like 200,000 cars a day traveled these 10 kilometers as they connected to other highways. And this mayor just said, let's get rid of it. By the way, we think we did that in Boston. Don't you believe it? We built a wider highway below ground, right? That's what we did, with your tax dollars, by the way. Thank you very much. But in Seoul, a much more congested city, they just got rid of this damn thing. And the result is this incredible environment. And by the way, notice something else, right? Notice the scale of the buildings when this was a highway just a few years ago, and notice the scale of the buildings right now, right? And it tells you something about what's important about cities. It tells you a lot. And it tells you also about how courageous we all need to be to continue to improve the quality of life in our cities. Thank you very much.
All the amazing work that we've done over the past 25 years, there's still so much to do. So, which brings us to the challenge. As our city prepares for inevitable growth, how do we make sure that we make the most of every opportunity? How do we invigorate the community and energize public discourse about downtown's future? How do we add value and protect as well as encourage new investment? Well, these are the goals of our year-long Urban Design Challenge. 6 urban design teams made up of local architects, developers, designers, and other various disciplines have been chosen to vision the highest and best use for 6 key downtown sites. In addition to reanimating these key opportunities for development, the challenge stresses the importance of urban design in downtown, as well as showcases our local talent in architecture and design, and we are very blessed to have a lot of it. From these concepts, the teams will be presented to the public approximately every 2 months throughout the year. The first presentation is scheduled for September 1st. The challenge will conclude in the summer of 2012 with a closing panel discussion of the projects. At that time, the most outstanding project will be awarded. So that's the challenge. Tonight, we had the pleasure of introducing you to the teams. And Christian Rushing and Ann Coulter have been helping us with this project. We're very excited about it, and I'll invite Christian to come up and talk about the sites.
Thanks, Kim. Well, it's my pleasure to be able to introduce the sites that'll be the focus for the Urban Design Challenge. A good urban place is connected in many ways, convenient, seductive. There we go. I could have finished Alex's talk for him, but I'll choose to jump straight into the sites. The sites were selected not necessarily because they're the most important developable sites in downtown, nor are they ones most in need of aid. They were selected because in concert they exhibit a broad range of scales, a variety of complexity, and they require different levels and types of thought. The body of work that's produced by the consideration of all these sites is going to provide a broad base for our continuing community dialogue about the future of our downtown. The first site is the 700 block of Market Street, and this site comprises a number of mid-block vacant parcels on the eastern side of Market Street in between 7th and 8th. This site has the potential to add significant animation to the city center. The second site is the Civic Forum block, and it's the block that is formed by 10th and 11th Street and Broad and Market Street. and this will provide a unique opportunity to do planning on a whole city block that's currently unimproved. The third site is Patton Parkway, and this site includes Patton Parkway itself, in addition to the parking lots to the east and southeast. And in addition to being centrally located, this has a great implication for connections between the city center, the university, and the M.L. King district. The fourth site is the 4th Street corridor, which includes 4th Street from US 27 to the intersection with Market Street. It also includes the parcel to the west of the Creative Discovery Museum and the parking lot of the Majestic Theater. This has strategic importance in that it's one of the primary gateways into downtown and the Riverfront District. The fifth site is the Vine Street corridor, and that includes Vine Street and its adjacent vacant lots and parking lots in between Georgia and the university. And in addition to having a large surface area, this has a fantastic opportunity to create a vital corridor in between the city center and the university. And the last site is Main and Broad, and this includes Main Street from US 27 to the intersection with Market Street and the block bounded by Main Street, Broad, 13th, and Chestnut. So with the sites having been introduced, I'll bring Kim back up to introduce you to the teams that will accept the Urban Design Challenge.
All right, Christian, which button? All right, drum roll, please. All right, so the 700 block team, and what I'll do is I'll introduce the team members. I'll ask you all to stand. Not everyone could be here for their picture. We took pictures last week. But the 700 block team has interest and experience in working in tight urban spaces. Not only have experience in urban design and planning that specifically addresses the challenges that this site has, they also have team members with a depth of experience in assessing the economic viability of commercial development. We are very excited about seeing their fresh vision for this parcel. It's very important to our city center. This team is the Dynamic Density. Team members are David Barlow Jr., Craig Peavy, Jay Floyd, Catherine Thompson, Mitch Patel, and Laura Duncan. So if team members are here, stand. And they're going to set the bar. Their project kicks off September 1st. We'll be doing their project here in Chattanooga. The next one, the Civic Forum. This team has a strong and demonstrated urban orientation that applies well to this site. The Civic Forum lot is an important piece of the Miller Park district fabric and needs a comprehensive and well thought out creative solution that not only benefits the urban core, but also the citizenry at large. We feel this is the perfect project for this team to showcase their talents. This team is Frank and Taylor and consists of Steve Haas, Bob Franklin, Rob Taylor, John Clark, Paul Rustan, Matt Brown, Glenn Craig, and Kate Creason. You all stand. The next project is Patton Parkway. This team has the talent, knowledge, and resources to present an intriguing solution to this portion of the Urban Design Challenge. They'll be addressing the site's historical significance as well as its proximity and importance to the city center. The team selected for the Patton Parkway site is Method E5. It consists of Tom Bartu, Frank Green, John Henry, Marshall Wright, and Shay Fortaleza. Sorry. You all stand. The next site is the 4th Street corridor. Team 4 welcomes the opportunity to explore an architecture of broad brushstrokes at this urban gateway site. They believe this site has an interesting kinetic energy. We look forward to seeing their creative solution to a vitally needed improved gateway into our downtown. The 4th Street corridor will be addressed by the LME architecture team. Bradley Shelton, Eric Myers, Matthew Wingett, Joseph Sawyer, Jared Chastain, and Bob McNutt. You all stand. The fifth site is the Vine Street Corridor. This team believes that the presence of a major university in the heart of our city has so much potential for quality of life and has as much potential as a great outdoor setting and strong urban character. They go on to say that this potential link seems to be one of the last great untapped frontiers of possibility for revitalization. And I say amen to that. The team selected for the Vine Street Corridor is the Idea Channel. It consists of Thomas Palmer, Blythe Bailey, Tara Maynor, Widgets and Stone, 26 Tools, Eric Cummings, Michael Prater, and Wes Michaels. Would you all stand? Our last site, Main and Broad. The offices of both architecture firms selected for the sixth site are located within the project boundaries. Additionally, a number of the team members live in the area as well. Principals of these firms have worked with a number of groups on projects to improve the South Side in general and Main Street specifically. The team selected for the Main and Broad Street site is Artec, HKA, BWSC. How many letters can we use? And they consist of David Hudson, Craig Cronenberg, Heidi Hefferland, Matt Stovall, Rice Williams, Justin Dunsday, Bruce Simonson, Daniel Oakley, Matthew Parks, Paul Barr, and John Brown. Congratulations. Well, these are the sites and the teams. I will tell you, we really were so pleased with the participation of so many different firms. We had a lot more firms participate than could be chosen. We're excited to see the program progress. We left little cards in your seat. You can follow us on Facebook tomorrow. The Facebook page will be up and our website. And again, September 1st, we'll be here, same time, same place, to talk about the 700 block. I want to thank you again, Alex. Thank you again, Alan, for reminding us of what makes our city so special, and thank you all so much for being here.